Hi. Thanks for thanks for coming. This is actually a good group. I appreciate that. Yeah, so we'll just jump right into it. So thanks for being here. My name is Nina, like Shakina said, and I'm going to talk about trans stuff. So I just say that right at the beginning because if you got confused and thought this was an Excel class, it's going to be it's going to be a weird hour for you. So a little bit more about me. It's brief. I was kind of depressed at how little I could think of to put in my bio, but I've been the director of adult education, faculty, and instruction since 2020. I taught ESL 7+ years before becoming staff. Some of it was here. I'm trans, I'm queer, and some of the other gay things. And I came out here last year. Also, I have a cat named Piccolo. He has 24 toes. Most cats have 18, so that's why that's special. That's my cat. Okay. Few disclaimers, things that I want to be clear about up front. First, I'm not the president of trans people. I'm not even the comptroller of trans people. So I don't speak for all trans people, right? I am a trans person. I speak for me. I am white. Surprise. And I'm quite privileged as trans people go. And I'm most familiar with binary trans femme experience. So I'm trans feminine, I'm woman, and I kind of fit very comfortably into that. Not all trans people do. A lot of people don't identify with one side. A lot of trans people identify with the masculine side. So this is the perspective that I'm coming from. There are many trans people who have been out longer than me and have more experience living publicly as trans. Like I said, I've been out here for about a year. Other places, it's complicated. I will try to present as expansive a view as possible, but it won't be perfect. Another trans person might have a totally different perspective on what's important, and that's totally cool. So, now that I kind of convinced you that I'm horrible and I have no business giving this presentation, why am I talking about trans people? Well, first, right, limited representation. Statistically, there's just not that many of us. And of the ones that there are, not many of them are at Triton College. And the ones at Triton College, nobody walked up to them and said, do you want to give a presentation on anything? So a lot of trans people don't have the kind of platform that I have. So I'm going to talk about this because it's not like there's somebody standing in line behind me. Other thing is limited scope of discussion. And this is the thing that really kind of made me think more about doing that is I have been to a lot of LGBT trainings and trans trainings and things like that at different places because I trying to find who my friends are when I was closeted and my enemies. But, and so there was kind of things that I noticed throughout, and, a lot of them were wonderful, but there were certain things that I thought weren't getting touched on that I thought it would be good to touch on. So I'm going to try and do that here. That's all, okay. So talking about what the normal kind of training on trans stuff covers, a lot of times it covers a lot about definitions. Right? What is a trans person? What is a cis person? What is gender identity? What is gender presentation? Going through that list. And again, that's important, right? That is useful information. Statistics in a lot of trans presentations, usually sad ones. A lot of those, which again, it's important. But when I talk to people, it seems like the thing that most people know about trans people is how many trans people attempt suicide. That's the main piece of information that people know, which again, it's important, but there are other things about trans people. Another one is justification, just like, why should you care about this? I try not to engage with that one. Specific rote words and phrases to avoid. Say this, don't say this, things like that. And then like kind of not in trainings, but something that we see kind of like in media. Anytime like you see trans people, there's kind of an assumption that they're fitting into this kind of like classic trans archetype that's assumed to be kind of like the basic right way to be trans. So hopefully trying to go beyond these. I will show some statistics. Hopefully they're different than the statistics you've seen before. Yeah, and so basically my point is, what is left out of these sort of discussions is like real engagement with the individual and collective ideas and histories of trans people, and like representation of the range and diversity of trans experience beyond just suffering. Because there's a lot more to it than that, right? And while I'm here, I'm hopefully going to cover a limited introduction, again, very limited, right, to kind of 3 things that I picked out that I thought could use more attention when we're talking about trans people. So the first one, transness and transgender people are not new. Like, really, they're not. Please stop saying they're new. Here's some examples of different trans people who would probably fall under the label of trans throughout history. I'm not going to talk about all of these people dressing as women and identifying as women in the BC, third genders, like this was kind of in the news a while ago, this Roman Empire who basically said, I'm a woman. And so like the British Museum had reclassified her in the British Museum like to be a woman and use she, her pronouns. This one I do want to point out. In 1919, Jewish scientist Magnus Hirschfeld found the Institute of Sexology in Berlin, and among other things, it was a very active center for providing gender-affirming care to trans women. It employed the trans women, and it featured them as conference speakers, right? They were like actively involved. The Institute was an early Nazi target, and in 1933 it was raided, shut down, and all of its books were burned. So like, of course the end is tragic, but like that's just to say that like this was a discussion, it was active, there was science on that long in the past. So I think there is a kind of really well-meaning urge to kind of be like, well, like, we got to talk about this because this is important nowadays, right? And like, here's a new thing that like we need to pay attention to. Now trans people are becoming important, right? But like, it's been around, right? And so I think some of the problems that come when we kind of have that thinking, oh, I wanted to mention, these are not from just America. You can be trans and not American. And also, I didn't research very hard on this. Like, this was easy to find. I didn't have to dig, just FYI. So some of the problems when we kind of have that thinking of trans people being new, first of all, like, there's this kind of feeling of like isolation and perpetual novelty. Trans people are like always entering the culture. They're always new to the culture. So they're never really part of the culture because we're always saying like, oh wow, you're so interesting. We want to learn about you. And it's like, I've been here. Like, and so it kind of, they're always other. Second one, it disregards oppression and resistance. There was a lot of stuff going on way in the past, you know. There are reasons that the trans history is not more well known that I think are probably obvious, right? And like it kind of ignores all of that stuff going on. You know, it disregards like really important trans figures in history. I take classes for a master's degree at UIC, and I was in a class, and the instructor kind of mentioned Stonewall, which you're probably familiar with it. It's like kind of the watershed. It was treated as the watershed moment for like the LGBTQ movement kind of being more active and like pushing more actively for rights. And he was talking and he said, like, kind of giving a quick explanation, that was a thing that was started by like a bunch of gay men. And like this is a college professor, really smart guy, and like that totally erases, and a lot of like movies and presentations have erased that, like the people that are mostly given credit for starting that, for being like the real initiators of it, are trans women of color, Marsha P. Johnson and things like that. But that, like, again, if we're thinking that this is a new thing and we just say, okay, that was the gay time, now is the trans time, right? Then you're ignoring a lot of important stuff. Also, it lowers the bar for progress, right? Where trans people are right now, it's a lot more impressive if we think that they arrived 10 years ago than if we think like this has been going on over 200 years, right? So when you say that like something is new, it's a lot easier to say like, let's take our time, let's figure things out. We're just still trying to learn about it. So I think that's one of the things, a few of the things and the problems that leads to. Second thing, trans experience is varied. Going back to what I said about these like kind of classic trans archetypes. So if you see trans people that are like covered like in the news and like shown in TV shows, there's like kind of really common characteristics. Like first, they're white. Second, they are like middle or upper class. There's kind of like a perception a lot of the time that like if you're below a certain level of income, you don't have the luxury of worrying about that sort of thing, or you don't think about it. The narrative that's often kind of given around those people is like, I knew as soon as I was born that like I was the wrong gender, and like ever since like my mom tried to give me G.I. Joes, but I wanted to play with Barbies, and like this very clear, I knew when I was in the fetus that like I was transgender in the fetus. But like, oh yeah, and then after they, you know, they have that period where it's really obvious to themselves, really obvious to everybody else that they're trans, then at one point they just kind of like, okay, I'm coming out, done. Like they come out all at once and then it's finished. It's a lot more complicated than that, and a lot more interesting. So apologies, these are not the right format, but so this is racial ethnic makeup of trans Americans who responded to like the largest transgender survey in the United States. This one's from 2015. You can see like this is the way that their demographics were divided up. If you look at this one, right, this is based on the 2020 census of all of America. They're the same, right? They're almost exactly the same, right? All of them fall within like maybe 2% of each other. So if we look at like a cross-section of trans America, we're just looking at a cross-section of America. So this kind of idea that like, you know, this is like the purview of like white people or things like that is harmful and like just, it's just really obviously wrong. Let's see, what else did I want to say about that? Cool. Also, there's kind of this thinking of like, this is like a city person thing, right? Again, this is the trans survey respondents. This is the survey respondents. The distribution is the same, right? So there are trans people in Florida. Let's see. talking about that kind of narrative of transness, right? This is also from that trans survey. People who knew that they were trans, started to think that they were trans 5 and under, it's a minority, right? There are them. That story absolutely does exist for lots of people, right? But not most trans people, definitely not all trans people. People coming out, starting to tell other people that they were transgender. Most people don't do that until like they're a young adult. And people do it all different ages. It goes all over the place. And I think this is another big thing that is really overlooked. I was at another training. This was like specifically about trans people, and it was more geared towards like K-12 educators. And the person that was facilitating it was not trans. It was a lovely lady, and she did a good job with it. But one of the questions that came up during the presentation was like, somebody asked like, is it possible for a person to find out they're trans like after high school, like after K-12? And the presenter was just like, I don't know. And like just that kind of thinking of like that, is that even possible? Like it kind of shows how narrow the understanding of like what it is to be trans and the correct path to being trans. Talking more about like this kind of, you are closeted, you're pretending to not be trans, and then all of a sudden you're out as being trans, is like this really off-on sort of thing, right? There's not statistics, but like this is this is how coming out is shown in like TV or film. Like, somebody is closeted and they're miserable, and then like one day they build up like the strength, and then they just come out and everything's just good and perfect. But really, like, and again, for some people that might be true, but like my experience was more like this. Kind of like I would think about something over and over and over again, right? I would come to some sort of realization, right? Oh, I need to do this, or I am this, right? Then I would start doing something with this. I'd come out to somebody or take some sort of step. Then I would freak out, or like something negative would happen. And then I would be like, wait, maybe I'm not trans, or something like that, just kind of being like, no, I can't, right? And then thinking about it again, and then just kind of going around in that circle. And it's just a matter of like starting here and then kind of slowly going out and out every time until like finally I was coming out at like bigger places, and it kind of built on itself as it went. But like, like if you were to ask me like, when did you come out? It's like, well, which time? Like, it's like, when did you realize you were trans? Well, which time? Because that stuff is, it's a lot of different steps. And again, for some people, it's like that. But for many trans people, it's very much not. Why is this important? First one, underserved populations. I couldn't think of a better way to say that, but we should not ignore the fact that there are trans people of color, right? Because they are like the most victimized. They're the people who are like at the highest risk to be murdered, at the highest risk for any sort of bad situation, like when they're trans or coming out. And just kind of pretending that that doesn't exist, that transness doesn't exist in those communities, you're like cutting those people off from visibility when they need it almost more than anybody else. Stereotyping, that's kind of obvious. Gatekeeping, some states, trans people have to get permission from a doctor to start hormones, right? Doctors are usually not trans. So the trans person has to go to the doctor, convince them that they're trans, and then the doctor will give them permission to take hormones. The doctor, when they're deciding whether or not the person is trans, they are looking at that classic trans archetype. So it's traditional that they would like ask, a little bit less so nowadays, but in many states, yes, in Britain definitely, ask questions like, what toys did you play with when you were growing up? What hobbies did you have? Who are your friends, right? And if those answers don't line up with that classic trans archetype, they don't give them hormones. They say, I think you're confused, go to therapy or something like that. Not that people shouldn't go to therapy, everybody should go to therapy. But, you know, and so there's that kind of knowledge among trans people that in states where this is required, the doctors are expecting these sort of answers in order to give you hormones. So when you go to the doctor, tell them that you wanted to play with Barbies when you were 1 year old. Tell them that you always knew. Give them all of this information, right? Because, you know, they want to get the pills that they need, right? Which again reinforces this idea, right, that this is how all trans people are, because we're telling people that this is how we are because that's what they're telling us that we are. So it kind of leads to this kind of reinforcing misunderstanding. So there's that. Okay, last one is being trans is good, actually. And it's a little bit more complicated than just that, but just like, I'll pause and say, like, before I kind of get into that part, like, I do want to acknowledge, like, that the threat of violence, legislation, and discrimination against trans people is real, it's current, and it's mainstream. I think that there is, you know, some thinking a lot of times in, like, states where it's safer to be trans that, like, you know, everything's just kind of, we don't see it as much. But there are many very mainstream figures and very many mainstream organizations and places that are very openly anti-trans. And despite what people might say, they actually don't suffer too much from it, right? So it's not like a niche kind of belief that if you're anti-trans, then you're kind of crazy with a tinfoil hat. It's everywhere, right? It's in the Illinois legislature. I mean, like, those people who are anti-trans are in the Illinois legislature, and they say some really horrible things. There was one. Good news is that recently, like, Illinois passed a bunch of bills, like last year, that kind of made things safer for trans people, which is wonderful. But you know, one senator in response to that said that he would, like, I think the phrase was, like, beat the piss out of, like, any man that used the women's restroom, like, at his kid's school or something, right? And he's still there, you know, he's still there. It's just he doesn't have the voting power to get what he wants. This is real. This is the map that a lot of trans people use when they're deciding where they can go on vacation, right? Because the blue states are where it's like, you can't read this, but we're talking about, like, anti-trans legislation risk. Blue are lower rates, and the dark blue is lower rates and protections. The light blue is, like, there's not a risk of anti-trans legislation. Light red, there's a risk but not active legislation. Red is there's some active legislation, some laws. Dark red is there's lots of anti-trans laws. And then Florida is just do not travel. So it's a real thing, right? Because, like, it's a real thing. But, right, representation, like I said, is limited, right? And what stories are we hearing, right? Almost always the negative ones, right? I think there are a lot of happy trans people, right? But I think the way that we are most comfortable engaging with trans people is, like, as a people, or not a people, as a group of people that are suffering all the time and are constantly being attacked, which is not untrue, but it's not the only thing about trans people. If you've like seen a TV show or a movie with trans people, if it's like positive about them, usually they introduce the trans person by having somebody say something mean about them being trans, right? That's the establishing shot usually. But people don't transition to be unhappy. So I have this here. One of the times that I realized that I was trans, it was in like a support group with like, it's complicated, but it was with like trans people talking to people who were thinking that they might be trans, kind of being a sounding board. They don't tell you that they're trans. There's a thing called the Trans First Directive, which means a trans person should never tell another trans person that they're trans. They have to figure it out by themselves. But anyway, so I was talking to somebody there, and they were like, why do you think that you're trans? I said a bunch of things, and they said, oh yeah, I relate to that. And my reaction to that was like, oh, you know, that's kind of the first time that I realized was not the thing that they said, but realizing how I felt about the thing that they said. And so I was like kind of freaking out, you know, it was scary, it was weird, and I was like kind of saying that. And they talked about a bunch of things. They're like, you know, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. Like, this is not, you're not being forced to. This is just who you are. It's not what you have to do. But, you know, a lot of people who transition, trans people who transition, are happier, right? People don't transition to be unhappy, right? And I didn't really think about it much until, like, I was starting to come out that, like, you know, there is this kind of feeling of, like, if you realize that you're trans, you are now cursed to transition, right? And deal with all of the crap that comes with that. But, like, you don't have to. There are lots of trans people that don't ever come out, right? You would have seen that in the statistics, right? But, you know, if somebody has made the determination that this choice is going to make me much happier, and then they put a lot of work in to get there, right? And then they achieve that goal, right? That's like a cool thing. Like, that's a thing to be happy about. It's like if somebody tells you that they just like got their PhD, you're not going to say like, oh, you must have suffered. You know, it's like, you know, congratulations. Like, that's a good thing that you wanted to do, and now you've done it. You know, there are other things that come with it, but, you know, people go through all of the crap because they know that it's going to make them happier, right? And, like, I'm very happy. So, like, these are pictures that I've taken. Obviously, these are pictures that I've taken myself. I didn't have pictures like this before, right? And I thought about putting older pictures of myself because I look sad in all of them. But, like, I don't really want to get to that, because what I try to emphasize is not that, like, I transitioned to escape from this living hell and things like that, but, like, I transitioned to be happy, right? Like most people do, if they transition. Okay. Why is this important? The first one I kind of mentioned is this idea of, like, transness as a curse, you know, like, and that's kind of how I felt initially, is like, I have this thing and I need to do this thing, or else I'm going to be miserable my whole life. Not seeing the kind of positive parts of that. You know, this kind of focus on only statistics about trans people getting attacked or trans people committing suicide and things like that. You know, it's this constant connection of transness and death, right? And so if you have that kind of constant reinforcement of that connection, right, that's all you know about trans people, like, you're not going to be happy if your kid turns out to be trans, not because you're a bigot, but because, like, all you know about trans people is that they die, right? So, you know, you're going to be upset if you find out that your kid is trans. Obviously, like, you know, even if it comes from a protecting space, that's going to influence your behavior towards the kid. You know, that's going to make all of this stuff more of a risk, the sort of negative side effects, the bad things that could happen. Right? Nobody has ever died from being trans, right? They die from things that people might do because they're trans. Second one, this kind of idea of like trans people being victims, that's kind of a common stereotype. And also this feeling of like trans people being like really hypersensitive and like always getting ready and like to be offended, and like if you say anything wrong, they'll snap at you. Like, I'm sure that there are people that are like that, but like, I don't think I'm like that. Like, and like, if you think about it, trans people, if they're out, they basically have to go to everybody in their life and tell them their most personal secret. It's hard to stay too sensitive after that, right? So I would say like maybe a little bit less sensitive than a lot of people, although I'm sure there's exceptions. And I think this kind of perception of hypersensitivity, it leads to like a hesitation to engage with discussions about transness, with trans people, with anything of like, making your classes or your workspace or something like. Hey, everybody here is great, by the way. But other places, hesitation to like kind of make that more welcoming, more inviting to trans people is like avoided, not because people don't want to do it, not because they're bigoted, but because they think they'll do it the wrong way and they'll get in trouble, which is like not true. Like if you've misgendered a trans person, it's probably not the first time that day that they've been misgendered, and they probably won't say anything about it, and if for some reason they did say something about it, it's not because one person said one thing, it's probably because it happened to them 7 times that day or something like that, and then they're getting annoyed at it. So trans people are not hypersensitive. You can talk to them, you can like engage with transness, you don't have to know all of the vocabulary, it's fine. So these are the 3 big kind of things that I think are kind of ignored when we talk about trans people. Of course, there's many others. I just kind of cherry-picked 3. My kind of point with this, which I may not have been super clear about, is like to be not as prescriptive as a lot of other like presentations on trans people are, to like not tell people to do anything, because I think that's how like a lot of these trainings go, is like, teach me how to not be bad with trans people. And like, I think that there are important things in there, but I think if you're just kind of memorizing, do this, don't do this, then you're never really going to understand and feel comfortable, right, kind of engaging with that group. So the idea is to kind of give like a wider view of like, here are some things about trans people that you might want to keep in mind if you're interacting with, thinking about, reading about trans people. If you do need like something to do, right, or like a call to action, here are some things that I think one might take away based on the information that I've shown. First, like just keep social historical context in mind, when you're talking about trans people, going back to like trans people are not new. Be visibly supportive. I say this, kind of talking about the range of trans experience. Like anybody could be trans, like in any situation. Like, so act as if anybody could be trans in every situation, right? Because, being somebody who was closeted for a long time, like seeing people who were visibly supportive, it did make a difference, and it kind of cleared that path to be able to come out faster. I think people talk about like, what's the word? Performative allyship, right? Which like where you're just kind of like showing something, you're putting something up on Instagram and you're not really doing anything about it. Like, you post I like trans people, but you're not doing anything about it. It's not the best thing that you can do, but it doesn't hurt anything, honestly. Like if I see somebody have that there, I will feel more comfortable around them. So I would say don't worry too much about that. Trans people aren't scary, physically or socially, or as sensitive as often assumed. Be suspicious of any person or group that creates valid, non-valid distinctions of trans folks. This person is doing it the right way. This person is doing it the wrong way. This person is not a real trans person. Intersectionality, right? Talking about like, you know, it is important to recognize that there are black trans people. There are black, like, black Hispanic people, God. There are black trans people, you know, and each of them is gonna have like a different experience, you know, based on all of these identities that they have, right? It's not a monolith. Listen to trans people and celebrate trans people, don't commiserate with them. I should have had a bigger finish, but that's all that I had. If you guys have questions, I will take them. I don't know if we have time or...
Yes, we
yeah?
have time for about, we have 10 minutes.
Okay, if people have them, if not, that's cool. Yeah?
I often get into this predicament with people who aren't super pro-trans.
Mm-hmm.
Their argument is always the bathroom thing.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the most frustrating things. And I know you can't shove opinions down people's throats,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or how they feel about things. But like, how do you handle it?
Also, could you repeat the question for the people in the back?
Oh, okay. Let me try and remember the whole question. It's basically like how, like when people are anti-trans, citing like bathroom safety as a reason, like how can you deal with those people? I have like a lot of different kind of intersecting feelings about that. On a certain level, I'm kind of tempted to think like, if somebody is thinking that now with the information that exists in the world, they're not anti-trans because of bathrooms. They're anti-trans because they want to be anti-trans, and they're choosing the bathroom thing as a potential justification. If you got rid of that justification, they'd get another justification. I don't want to say it's like, so sometimes, you know, it's a matter of like, is anything I say going to have an impact? Do they want to actually engage with this, or like, are they going to sit in this position no matter what? If they're going to sit in that position no matter what, like honestly, don't waste your time, right? Because like you're just stressing yourself out. You know, if it is like a good, hard for me to imagine a good faith argument of that. Like, I mean, like there isn't any evidence that places where trans women use women's bathrooms have more violent crimes or anything than anywhere else, right? The statistics just don't support that in any way. That whole argument is based on the feeling that some people have that I think it would be more dangerous. It's not based on fact or anything grounded in reality. So, I mean, ask them like, okay, show me the situations where a trans woman has murdered a cis woman in a bathroom. Good. Oh, yeah.
Does trans people remain trans people? For example, you know, I don't see you as a trans person. You are a woman.
Uh-huh.
You look like a woman.
Thank you.
Pronouns, you know, like, it's done. You
Uh-huh.
know, like after a certain point, it's done. You know, like, do you see yourself as a trans? Like that, you know, like it's over.
Unfortunately, there's no cure for being trans.
So you need to work.
Uh-huh. Okay. I get that. And I think it's a good thing to bring up. Is like me, like, am I a woman? Yeah, I am, and like that is it.
Trans, you're a woman. It's over.
Okay. and 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 so is that a question or a command? Is that,
I want to
yeah.
know how you feel about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a woman, and that part of my identity is really important to me, you know, and when people engage with me on that level, it means a lot, because I think sometimes the opposite is true, that people see you only as a trans woman, as a trans and not a woman, right, which is a problem. Do I still consider myself trans? Yeah, I mean, I do, for a few reasons. One, I mean, this is it. Your history informs who you are, right? And I spent many, many years thinking constantly about being trans and, like, was I trans and not trans, and how do I accept being trans and things like that. And that, you know, I don't think about it as much now, but it did inform who I am. You know, thinking about, like, you know, your childhood experiences, your experiences in school, those are a part of who you are. And, you know, that was an issue for me, you know, so it kind of remains being a part of it. What else was I going to say about that? I think one of the reasons that I'm a little bit more open about being trans is just the fact that there aren't that many trans people, you know, and I think, like I said, when I was closeted, it would have helped me a lot to see other trans people. I didn't know any trans people, like, until I was well into adulthood, you know, and so, like, then that definition of being trans didn't exist to me. You can't think that you're something without that word existing, right? Yeah, I know. But yeah, but like seeing somebody who is trans being trans gives other people the permission to be trans too, is kind of my thinking about it. Yeah. Hillary.
Okay, thank you, Nina, for sharing. This was fantastic. What would you tell your younger self?
It's a transition. Now. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more, okay. One, like, it sounds very corny, but like your feelings are valid. Like, intuition about these sort of things is like really important, and like people understand themselves and they understand what they are. So like you don't need to look for like some sort of external proof to justify this thing that is occupying all of your thoughts that you know about yourself, but like you need somebody else to tell it. So just basically trust yourself. Second thing is, weirdly, and I did not expect this, give other people a little bit more credit. And that's maybe not good advice for everybody, but it was really good advice for me. I think, you know, again, talking about like the way the trans experience is shown, I was like totally like expecting my life to kind of explode, you know, if I started coming out or something like that. And I think for a lot of people that's a reasonable fear. For me, everything went pretty good, you know, and like I wasted a lot of time being afraid and ruminating on a lot of things that didn't become issues anyway. Yeah.
You went around about how there's like a negative connotation when it comes to trans people. For someone, obviously, you know, I don't know much into the trans world. But if I were to, expand those resources or that opportunity to bring more light into the trans world, what kind of positive connotations would you like associated?
Okay, this is a weird answer. Did you see Barbie?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you know Dr. Barbie? Dr. Barbie, okay, yeah. Dr. Barbie's trans. Yeah. And so, like, weirdly enough, that's one of my favorite pieces of trans representation in years, just because she is treated exactly like everybody else, and she's having fun like everybody else. She has the same issues as everybody else. She's not like trans Barbie, or like something that is like more like associated with men's habits Barbie. It's like just Dr. Barbie. So I think like where somebody is trans and it's not like a huge plot point, I think is good. In that movie, I would say it's not clear that she's trans. I think that they're like having a movie or having like sort of representation where somebody is trans, it is acknowledged, but it's not a huge part of the plot, and it's not only shown by them being discriminated against. I think that sort of thing is really helpful. I'm trying to think of something that has good trans representation that I like a lot. God, I'm blanking. There is stuff. Oof. Anyway, that sort of thing. Yeah. Kathy, or Karina.
Just referring back to Kathy's, just to make it relatable for me, like when you were talking about the history, like for example, me, I'm American. I was born in America. I'm glad I'm American, but I can't ever say that I'm just American. I'm Mexican American, because I was raised, my parents struggled, what they did to get me here.
Yeah.
So I understand how we can't just call you a woman, although you are a woman, like I am American, you're trans, because that comes with so much history, so much struggle, and we can't just erase that. So I appreciate how you try to explain how you stick to being trans because of the history. Like I can't just say I'm American. I would have to say I'm Mexican American because of what comes with it. That's me.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Thank you. Yeah, Zelda.
I have a question. I just want to tell you you're awesome. And thank you for doing this, because I was actually listening to a podcast the other day. It's a podcast that debunks silly, not real science thing. They were talking about how everyone's panicking about rapid onset gender dysphoria. Yes. So they mentioned in it that they're like, yeah, most people don't know a trans person, and that made me really sad, because I've been fortunate enough to have quite a few trans people in my life. But I just think that the fact that we all get to know you and hear from you is very important and special, and I know I'm making you uncomfortable, so we'll stop now.
Oh, thanks. And I mean, Zelda, I'll say, like, the fact that you have trans people around you is probably a testament to the fact that you've made trans people feel comfortable around you.
Maybe. I was little when I met some do it at summer camp. I went to the summer camp. There's all kinds of people there.
I mean, like, take the compliment.
Okay. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah.
First of all, Zelda, if you're listening to Maintenance Phase,
girl,
I just listened to that.
What's up?
It was really good. Very interesting. Second, more towards Nina. So you might have already answered this kind of in the previous couple of questions, but I guess because have you seen an increase in like media, TV, books, podcasts, any form of media of like trans identity, or more positive portrayal, or less kind of stereotypical? And I guess I'm just asking because you're more in tune to like what you're watching. Yeah. As an education moment, but like, just, have you seen that like lately? Because I know, as you said, it's not new.
No, it is a. I am like required to watch anything that has a trans woman in it.
You're not the president.
Yeah, I'm not the president, but like, yeah, no, anything like, I watched Euphoria. I hate Euphoria, but I watched a lot of Euphoria. I would say yes. I would say it's increasing on both sides. So I would say that there's a lot more visibility, and visibility causes a lot more people who are upset with that to be a lot more aggressive and motivated in putting out negative portrayals and things like that. But it also kind of gives a little bit more space where those sort of things are welcome for people to put that sort of thing in. So yeah, I mean, I would say that it kind of increases on both sides, you know.
Well, we want to thank you for sharing with us today. Let's give her a hand.